If you're like me and my husband and you love spaghetti squash, you're going to find this video very helpful. The best tasting spaghetti squash we have ever had comes directly from my garden, and today I'm going to teach you how you can grow it. I'm Lisha, and thanks for joining me on my channel, Thriving Plants.
When you plant your seeds, you're going to plant 2 to 3 seeds per hole, an inch deep. If you want to speed up germination, you can soak your seeds for 2 to 3 hours, but don't soak them longer than that because you can drown the seed. I grow my plants in a 20-gallon container. I only put 1 plant per container, but if you're growing in the ground or a raised bed, you want your plants 18 to 24 inches apart in rows that are 3 to 4 feet apart. You're going to thin them to the strongest seedling when the first set of true leaves appear, which are actually the second set of leaves that you're going to see your plant grow. Spaghetti squash requires rich, well-draining soil with a pH of 6 to 6.8. Before planting, add 3 to 4 inches of compost to the top of your soil. Still add your fertilizer because compost is a soil conditioner. It does not contain a lot of nutrients. It helps with drainage and it helps to make the soil healthier. Before planting, mix a general all-purpose granular fertilizer into the soil. When the plant is 6 inches tall, add a fertilizer that's higher in phosphorus because it helps promote blooms in plants. Then add more when the plant begins to develop blooms. Avoid fertilizers that are high in nitrogen because nitrogen promotes growth of vines and leaves instead of blooms.
Spaghetti squash require a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight, but they do best when they receive at least 8 hours of direct sunlight. They're also a very warm season crop, so you do not want to transplant your plants until the outside temperatures have reached a minimum of 65 degrees. They cannot tolerate even a light frost. If you put them out too early, you're going to kill your plants. Make sure you take the time and you wait until the temperature is right to transplant your plants. Your plants also need to receive 1 to 2 inches of water per week. You want the soil to remain moist 6 to 8 inches down. You don't want your soil wet because if it's wet, the plant is going to rot. The first thing you want to do when you take your plant out of its pot is go ahead and gently loosen the roots just a little bit, because otherwise you end up with roots that continue to grow around like this. They become this tight ball and they have a much harder time making their way into the soil.
I always add a general all-purpose granular fertilizer before I plant my plants.
When I plant my spaghetti squash, I'm going to plant it deeper because spaghetti squash actually grows more roots along its stem. I'm digging this hole slightly deeper. I want to make sure that my soil comes to right about here. You want to put about 2 to 3 inches of mulch on top to help preserve moisture and prevent weeds from getting into the soil, because weeds are going to take away from the nutrients that this plant needs so that it can thrive.
This is where the mulch comes to on my container after I add 2 inches. You can see it has about an inch on the top, and I leave an inch so that I can water without it coming over the sides. After this sinks down another inch, I'll add another inch of mulch on top of it.
If you do see any flowers on your plant, you do want to go ahead and remove those.
You remove the blooms from a newly transplanted plant because you want the plant to put all of its energy into growing a strong root system so that the plant will grow to be very healthy. Otherwise, the plant will put its energy into producing blooms so that it can produce seeds. Pinching off blooms is something that's very easy to do. All you need to do is come down here right below the bloom and just use your fingernail and snip it off like that.
I've already taken them off of here. That's why you can see the ends of these stems have been removed. Those are actually blooms that were on here.
There are 2 different types of flowers on a squash plant. You have a male flower and then you have a female flower. And it's easy to tell the difference because you'll see underneath the female flower this tiny little squash that is going to grow as long as this gets pollinated. and it's very easy to tell that this does not have that. And the pollen needs to come from this flower to this flower in order for you to grow your squash. If this turns yellow, that means that this was not pollinated. And you can hand pollinate if you have an issue with not having enough pollinators in your garden. It's very easy to do. You can use a small paintbrush to transfer the pollen from inside the male flower to inside of the female flower, and I will show you how to do that. First, locate a male flower, which is this one here. Then locate a female. This one has already been pollinated, but I'm going to use it to show you how to do this. You're going to open your male flower and then take your paintbrush, and you want to brush a little bit of the pollen onto the bristles of the brush. You may not be able to see the pollen, but it is still there. Then you're going to take the paintbrush and open up your female flower. This is the part of the flower where your pollen needs to go. Just take your brush and gently brush the pollen onto this area, and that will pollinate your flower. I always grow many of my plants vertically because it helps cut down on diseases, especially things like powdery mildew. It increases the airflow that they receive. Not all of my plants are grown vertically. This is my yellow summer squash plant. I'm going to grow it over the side of this container, but since I use pallets, all of these gaps between the slats allow airflow up through, and that helps to decrease the chance of disease. If you're trellising your squash plants, you're going to need to support the squash. Otherwise, they become heavy and damage your vine. I use a mesh produce bag because they allow for airflow, which decreases the chance of disease. Place the squash inside of the bag, making sure to use a bag that's large enough to hold the squash when it's fully grown. Tie the string around the board onto the trellis and check the squash often to see if you need to adjust the bag to allow room for it to grow. You need to check the plants often from the beginning of June to mid-July because that's when vine borers lay their eggs in plants. Check the nodes, which is this area here, for damage because that is where vine borers typically lay their eggs. And for these holes because it's a sign that larva is feeding on the vine of the plant. If you cut this open, you're going to find a larva in there, which I did. I took it out and I disposed of it and then sprayed this plant with some neem oil to help seal the wound and keep any fungi and bacteria and other insects out of it. And even though this split, it will heal. I can show you my vines split on occasion, and they always heal. This is the damage that the vine borer caused. And you can tell that even though it caused this type of damage for me having to remove it, the plant is still growing fine, still getting blooms, starting to get a squash here. There's some more females over there. As long as you can stop them before they're able to destroy a lot of the plant will still grow. This is a squash bug, and if you do see one, you're going to want to pick it off and drop it into a bucket of soapy water because it spreads disease.
By now, you've learned everything that you need to successfully grow your own spaghetti squash. I want to thank you for joining me today on my channel, Thriving Plants. Please hit the subscribe button down below. You can catch all of my future videos. I will see you next time. Bye.